Wisdom Symphony.
Ever had that weird feeling where something doesn't quite add up? Maybe it was a passing moment, like seeing your reflection, but feeling like it wasn't you, or catching sight of something that didn't seem to belong. What if I told you that moments like these might actually hint at a much deeper truth about reality? That what you're seeing, feeling, and experiencing isn't as real as it seems. Think about this. Your brain, that marvelous machine, is constantly constructing a version of reality for you, a sort of personal theater. But here's the twist. It's not showing you everything as it is. Instead, it's giving you a shortcut, a controlled hallucination that's designed to make things easier, to help you survive, not to uncover the truth. All right, let's dive deeper. Imagine you're standing in a forest. You're surrounded by towering trees, the sounds of rustling leaves, the smell of damp earth. It all feels so vivid, so real. But is it? What if I told you that what you're experiencing isn't the forest as it truly is? It's just how your brain interprets it. You see, we're not passively receiving reality. Our brains are actively guessing, predicting, and crafting our perception every second. And here's where it gets really wild. What we see here, even feel, it's all a sort of best guess made by our brains. Scientists have found that our minds work like prediction machines. Instead of simply waiting for information to come in, your brain constantly forms expectations based on your past experiences and current surroundings. It's like a filter. When you look at a tree, for instance, your brain doesn't need to analyze every single leaf, branch, or bark pattern. Instead, it predicts tree and fills in the rest for you. The prediction machine. Picture your brain as this top-level detective piecing together clues. It doesn't wait to observe reality. It anticipates it. Think about when you're walking in a familiar neighborhood. Do you actually notice every single detail? Not really, right? Because your brain has already filed away what it expects to see, so it doesn't need to focus on each house, each car. It's a shortcut to save energy. Scientists call this predictive processing. Essentially, your brain is constantly comparing what it expects to see with what your senses actually deliver. And if those two don't match up, we get something called a prediction error. This is like a mental wow. What was that? Moment. For example, imagine you're expecting to see a normal green tree, but suddenly you spot a bright blue one. That's going to stand out because it breaks your brain's prediction. This whole idea of predictive processing isn't just an abstract concept. It's something we feel every day, in both subtle and mind-bending ways. The power of expectation. Take this simple scenario. You're at home alone washing dishes. As you turn off the water, you glance into the shiny faucet, and for a split second, something feels off. You don't see your reflection. There's nothing staring back. Suddenly, your mind is racing. Am I dreaming? Am I even real? But before you get too freaked out, you blink, look again, and there's your reflection, right where it should be. What just happened? Was it a glitch in reality? Maybe not. Instead, it's likely your brain's predictions went haywire for a moment, making it temporarily fail to match what it expected to see. This experience, unsettling as it was, shines a light on a much bigger question. How much of what we perceive is even real? Controlled hallucination, the science. So why do scientists say reality is just a controlled hallucination? To understand this, let's dig a bit into how vision works, or at least how we think it works. Most people assume that we see by capturing images, almost like a camera. Light enters the eye, an image is formed, and then our brains interpret it. But here's where things take a twist. Instead of mirroring reality, our brains are actually constructing it based on expectations, piecing together bits of past information, with just enough new sensory data to create a cohesive experience. Imagine your brain as a projector, not a camera. It's projecting its own version of the world, moment by moment, adjusting based on what it expects and only really recalculating when something drastically different comes along. This is why two people can look at the same object and see something slightly different. Their brains are running different programs, so to speak, based on their unique life experiences. An example in everyday life. Think about a simple card trick. A magician asks you to pick a card, any card. They shuffle the deck, and somehow, magically, your chosen card appears in their hand. Your brain was busy expecting one thing, a totally shuffled deck, but was faced with an outcome that didn't make sense based on that expectation. You experience a tiny moment of prediction error. That's why the trick feels so surprising. It's a break in your brain's normal prediction process, forcing you to adjust your understanding of what's possible. A real-time feedback loop. Our brains work on a feedback loop. Imagine it like this. Your brain is sending out a rough draft of reality based on predictions it's already made. Then sensory information from the outside world, like sights and sounds, comes in, almost like edits being suggested. If these new edits match up with the draft, the brain keeps running with its predictions. But if they don't, the brain takes note, adjusts its model, and tries again. So when you're watching a movie, for instance, and a loud sound suddenly booms out of nowhere, that jump scare is a direct hit to your prediction machine. Your brain didn't expect that sound, so it forces a reaction. It's almost as if your brain is updating its storyline on the fly, making your experience of reality a mix of what you expect and what you're forced to notice. Evolution's hand in all of this. Now, you might be wondering, why doesn't my brain just show me what's actually there? The answer? Survival. Evolution has shaped our minds not to present the most accurate version of reality, but rather the most efficient and survival-oriented one. If you had to process every detail around you, your brain would use up way too much energy. So instead, it gives you just enough information to get by, filling in gaps and skipping over details it deems unimportant. The energy efficiency trick. Here's a little secret about your brain. It's a master at saving energy. Imagine if every time you saw a tree, your brain had to reanalyze it from scratch. You'd be exhausted. So instead, your brain takes shortcuts by predicting what's most likely based on what you've already seen. It's like watching a movie online, only the parts of the screen that change get reloaded. Everything else stays as it was, saving time and bandwidth. Similarly, your brain only updates its reality when something unexpected pops up. It's an energy-saving hack that's been passed down through evolution. For our ancestors, this ability meant the difference between life and death. Imagine being in a dense jungle. Noticing every single leaf, branch, and shadow would slow you down. Instead, your brain predicted the basics, only alerting you if something unusual like a predator or danger popped up. This ability to ignore predictable details and focus on anomalies kept our ancestors safe and agile. Your reality, your version. This is why we sometimes say everyone sees the world differently. It's not just a figure of speech. Two people might literally see the same thing differently because their brains are predicting based on different past experiences. Think about the feeling of déjà vu. You walk into a room and everything feels strangely familiar. It's as if you've been there before. But have you? Or is your brain just drawing on similar past experiences, creating an overlay of familiarity that feels like a memory? In a sense, every time you look around, you're not seeing the world as it is. You're seeing your brain's best guess. You're living in a tailored reality, customized by your own experiences and expectations. And this becomes especially clear when people experience things that defy ordinary explanation, like hallucinations, dreams, or altered states of consciousness. controlled hallucinations, and everyday life. Let's take an example from everyday life. Have you ever been in a dark room, maybe just drifting off to sleep, and suddenly you see or sense something move? A shadow in the corner, or a figure in the doorway? You snap awake, heart racing, only to find nothing. Was it a ghost? Maybe your brain playing tricks on you? Most likely, it was a classic case of controlled hallucination. When sensory information is limited, as it is in a dark room, your brain fills in the gaps. With less visual information coming in, it starts relying more heavily on past experiences and expectations. If you've ever felt uneasy in the dark, your brain may project that fear onto the scene, creating shadows or movements that aren't there. This is your brain's way of making sense out of uncertainty, but it also shows how flexible and sometimes unreliable our perception can be. A shared dream? Here's something to think about. If everyone's reality is slightly different, then is there such a thing as a true reality? Scientists say we're all in a kind of shared dream, where our brains agree on basic principles like colors, shapes, or sounds, but the finer details are subjective. Imagine if you and a friend both look at the same red apple. You both agree it's red, right? But does your red look exactly the same as theirs? You'll never know for sure because your perception of red is based on your brain's interpretation. In a way, we're all trapped in our own unique versions of reality. This phenomenon is why things like art, music, and storytelling can evoke such different responses in different people. Each person's brain interprets these experiences through the filter of their own memories, beliefs, and emotions. A painting might feel joyful to one person, but sad to another. A song that makes one person nostalgic might leave someone else indifferent. We're all working with our own reality processing machines. The role of prediction errors. When our brains predict something and it turns out to be wrong, that's a prediction error. And it's these little errors that force our brains to adjust, refine, and grow. Prediction errors make you pause, rethink, and recalibrate. It's like realizing you've been singing the wrong lyrics to a song your whole life. That whoops moment forces you to update your understanding, and you'll likely never forget the right lyrics again. Imagine walking through a city you think you know well, and you suddenly stumble upon a new street or building you don't recognize. For a split second, you might feel disoriented. That's your brain encountering a prediction error. It thought it knew the layout, but reality just threw a curveball. It's these unexpected experiences that keep us aware and learning. Our minds are constantly reshaping themselves to match the most accurate model of the world they can create. Reality as an interface. Some scientists have suggested that what we see is less like a window into reality and more like a simplified user interface, much like icons on a computer. You click on an icon to open a file, right? But the icon doesn't show you the complex code and data behind it. It's just a convenient symbol. In the same way, our senses provide a simplified version of reality, giving us just enough information to navigate, survive, and make decisions. Think about something like time. We experience it as a linear progression, past, present, future. But some theories in physics suggest time might be far more complex, perhaps even nonlinear. Our brains, though, present it to us in the simplest form because that's all we need to function in day-to-day life. How illusions reveal the truth. Ever looked at an optical illusion? They're fun, right? But illusions actually reveal a lot about how our brains work. When you see a picture that looks like both a vase and two faces, your brain has to choose which image to focus on. The reason you can't see both at once is because your brain is wired to settle on one interpretation at a time. Optical illusions show us the gaps in our perception, the ways our brains fill in what they expect to see. Consider those experiments where people wear goggles that flip their vision upside down. At first, everything looks wrong. But after a few days, their brains adapt, and the world looks right again even though they're still wearing the goggles. Our perception of up and down is flexible, showing us that even our sense of direction is a kind of controlled hallucination, crafted by the brain based on what it expects. So where does this leave us? Understanding that reality is a controlled hallucination might seem unsettling, but in a way, it's also empowering. It reminds us that our experiences, our reality, isn't fixed. We can challenge it, explore it, and even change it. Just like a magician uses illusions to reshape our perception, we can learn to question our own mental shortcuts and start seeing beyond them. The next time you feel like something doesn't feel right, pay attention. Is it really reality shifting, or just your brain's model getting an update? And maybe, just maybe, these moments of disorientation are the brain's way of reminding us that reality is far more mysterious than it appears. After all, if we're each living in our own personal dream, isn't it possible to wake up and see the world in a whole new way?